He forced his rejected Omega to kneel before his new Luna. But when the ancient throne rose and bowed to the girl he cast aside, the prophecy she never knew she carried erupted awake, and now, as kings tremble and shadows whisper of what her awakening will unleash, one question remains. If destiny itself kneels for her, what will she become when the world tries to make her break? Before we begin, do tap subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. It warms my heart to see our little kingdom grow. Now then, let us step into the first moment where Sierra's world begins to unravel. Chapter 1. The Prophecy's Shadow. The ceremonial bread crumbled to ash in Sierra's trembling hands. 3 years. 3 years since Elias had ripped her heart from her chest in front of the entire Moonhaven pack, declaring her cursed by prophecy and unfit to be Luna. 3 years of scrubbing floors where she once walked as his chosen mate. Sierra! The head cook's shrill voice cut through her bitter memories. You've ruined the feast bread again. She stared at the blackened loaves, confusion flickering through her emerald eyes. The bread had been perfect moments ago. Now it looked like charcoal, still warm from ovens that had been cold for hours. Sorry, Cursed! Whispered a kitchen maid, crossing herself. Everything she touches turns to ruin. Sierra's jaw clenched. If only they knew the real curse wasn't her touch, it was loving a coward who believed in oracle's riddles over their mate bond. Through the narrow kitchen window, she glimpsed the great hall's preparations. Today, Elias would officially claim Lady Camilla as his Luna. Today, Sierra would watch her replacement take everything that should have been hers. The shadows in the corner seemed to writhe, responding to her rising fury. She blinked, and they stilled. Get these to the pigs, the cook snapped, and stay in the kitchens during the ceremony. We can't have you cursing the new Luna. As Sierra gathered the ruined bread, a chill swept through the castle. Every wolf stopped, hackles rising as an overwhelming presence approached the gates. Even the stones seemed to whisper of something ancient stirring. On the highest tower, a hooded figure watched Sierra through violet eyes that had seen centuries pass. The prophecy's time had come. Chapter 2. Forced to witness. You will attend the ceremony. Sierra's blood turned to ice at Elias's cold command. He stood in the kitchen doorway, tall and handsome as always, but his hazel eyes held nothing but cruel satisfaction. I don't think you will serve the wine in your servant's dress, where everyone can see what becomes of those who defy destiny. His lips curved into a smile that made her stomach churn. Consider it closure, Sierra. For both of us. The kitchen staff scattered like mice before a cat, leaving Sierra alone with the man who'd once whispered promises of forever against her skin. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Because I want Camilla to see exactly who she's replacing, and I want the realm to witness how completely I've moved on from my mistake. Each word landed like a physical blow. Sierra lifted her chin, forcing steel into her voice. I'll serve your precious wine, Elias, but don't expect me to bow. Something flickered in his eyes, regret? Fear? But it vanished as quickly as it came. Hours later, Sierra stood in the great hall's shadows, wearing her rough servant's dress while nobles dripped in silk and jewels. Lady Camilla glided past in a gown of silver moonlight, her ice-blue eyes dismissing Sierra like she was furniture. Pour, Camilla commanded, not even looking at her. Sierra's hand shook as she filled the goblet. Wine splashed onto Camilla's pristine dress. Clumsy, Camilla sneered. But what else can we expect from cursed blood? Around them, nobles whispered and pointed. Sierra's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she held her ground. Then, the massive oak doors groaned. A presence unlike anything Sierra had ever felt crashed over the hall like a tidal wave of pure power. Chapter 3. The Humiliation Ceremony. The great hall fell silent as death. Elias stood at the altar, Camilla radiant beside him in her silver gown. Ancient tapestries depicting moon goddesses and wolf kings hung from stone walls that had witnessed centuries of ceremonies. Today, Elias began, his voice echoing through the vaulted space. I sever all ties to the past and claim my true Luna. Sierra's hands clenched around the wine pitcher. Every eye in the hall seemed fixed on her, waiting for her to break. Sierra, Elias called, his voice carrying false gentleness. Come forward. Her feet moved against her will, carrying her toward the dais, where the ancient Moonhaven throne sat carved from a single piece of midnight stone. Kneel, he commanded. Kneel before your new Luna and accept that what we had was nothing but youthful folly. The nobles leaned forward, hungry for her humiliation. Camilla's smile was sharp as winter frost. Sierra's knees touched the cold stone. Rage and grief warred in her chest, and something else, something that made the air around her shimmer with heat. Accept that you were never worthy, Elias continued. Accept that. The throne behind him began to glow, soft at first, then brighter, until ancient runes carved into its surface blazed with golden light. The nobles gasped, stepping back as power crackled through the air like lightning before a storm. What? Camilla's voice cracked. The massive oak doors at the hall's end exploded inward. Wood splintered and flew as a figure stepped through the destruction, radiating power that dropped lesser wolves to their knees. Sierra's breath caught as golden eyes, ancient, knowing, predatory, locked onto her kneeling form. The Alpha King had arrived, and the way he looked at her, like she was something precious he'd been searching for across lifetimes, made her heart forget how to beat. Chapter 4. The Alpha King's Claim. Damon Blackthorne entered like a force of nature given flesh. Power rolled off him in waves so intense that seasoned warriors dropped to one knee, their wolves whimpering in submission. His midnight hair caught the torchlight as golden eyes swept the hall, dismissing kings and nobles alike until they found her. The mate bond struck Sierra like lightning. Every cell in her body ignited, recognizing him with a certainty that stole her breath. This was her true mate, not the coward who'd rejected her, but this magnificent, terrifying male who commanded the very air around him. Rise! His voice rumbled through the hall, and though he spoke to everyone, his eyes never left Sierra's face. Stand, little wolf. She couldn't have disobeyed if she'd wanted to. Her body moved without conscious thought, drawn upright by the absolute authority in his tone. Your Majesty, Elias stammered, his earlier confidence crumbling. We weren't expecting. No. Damon's voice cut like a blade. You weren't. He stalked forward, nobles scrambling out of his path. With each step, the ancient throne's glow intensified, runes blazing brighter until they painted the hall in gold. Who? Damon asked, softly, dangerously. Commanded my mate to kneel? The temperature in the hall plummeted. Ice crystals formed on the stone walls as his power surged, barely contained. Elias's face went white. Your mate? But she's just mine. The word carried the weight of an avalanche. She kneels to no one but her true mate. Camilla's strangled gasp echoed through the sudden silence. Her perfect ceremony lay in ruins, her moment of triumph shattered by the arrival of a male who could crush them all without effort. This is impossible, Elias whispered. The prophecy said. The prophecy? Damon interrupted, finally looking away from Sierra to pin Elias with a stare that promised violence, was never about bringing death to her mate. His smile was winter itself. It was about bringing death to anyone foolish enough to harm her. If this twist already has your heart racing, do subscribe. My dears, your support keeps these stories alive. Chapter 5. Ancient Magic Awakens. The Moonhaven throne moved. Solid stone that had sat unmoved for 1,000 years scraped against the floor, sliding toward Sierra as ancient magic recognized something in her blood that had been sleeping far too long. Runes blazed along the throne's surface, not just decorative carvings, but words in the old tongue that made court scholars gasp and fumble for translation books. Eternum Regina, one whispered, his voice shaking. Luna Bellator, Eternal Queen, Warrior Luna. Sierra stared as golden light enveloped her, making her auburn hair shine like flame and her emerald eyes glow with inner fire. Power coursed through her veins, warm and terrible and completely beyond her control. What's happening to me? She breathed. Damon moved to her side, his presence steadying her even as magic crackled between them like visible lightning. You're awakening, he murmured, wonder and possession warring in his voice. Your true nature is finally free. No, Elias backed away, shaking his head frantically. No, this can't be right. The oracle said she would bring death. To those who threaten her mate, Damon finished, his golden eyes never leaving Sierra's face. The prophecy was never about her being cursed, you fool. It was about her being blessed. The air around them shimmered with heat and power. Where their hands touched, golden sparks danced across their skin. She was meant to stand beside a king, Damon continued, his voice dropping to a possessive rumble. Not kneel before a pretender. Camilla's face twisted with fury and fear. This is impossible. I am Luna now. The ceremony means nothing. Sierra found her voice at last, and it rang with newfound authority. You can't claim what was never offered freely. The magic settling into her bones felt like coming home after years of exile. She understood now why dishes cracked when she was angry, why shadows seemed to follow her, why her dreams showed glimpses of futures written in blood and starlight. She wasn't cursed. She was legendary. And the male beside her, whose power called to hers like a missing piece of her soul, was going to help her claim everything that was rightfully theirs. Chapter 6. The King's Protection. She comes with me. Damon's words weren't a request, they were a decree that brooked no argument. His arm slid around Sierra's waist, and she felt his power wrap around her like armor. Now wait just a minute, Elias sputtered, his political mask slipping to reveal the desperation beneath. You can't just take her. There are laws, pack bonds, prior claims. Prior claims? Damon's laugh was winter wind through bare branches. You rejected her, publicly, brutally. His golden eyes turned predatory. That severed any rights you might have had. The magic radiating from him made the stone walls crack. Several nobles backed toward the exits, their wolves cowering in the presence of something far beyond their understanding. The Council of Alphas will never accept this, Elias tried again. She's Omega-born, untrained. She, Damon interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, is my queen. Question that again, and I'll show you exactly why even other kings bow when I enter a room. Power exploded from him like a shockwave, driving everyone except Sierra to their knees. The ancient throne's runes flared so bright they painted the hall in gold, responding to the combined magic of a true mated pair. Sierra felt it too, the absolute certainty that she belonged beside this magnificent, terrifying male. Every instinct in her body screamed that he was safety, protection, home. I don't understand any of this, she whispered against his chest, breathing in his scent of pine and storm-dark skies. You will, he promised, his voice gentle now, meant only for her ears. But not here, not surrounded by those who sought to break you. Camila finally found her voice. This is madness. The realm will not accept. The realm will accept whatever I tell them to accept. Damon cut her off without even looking in her direction. I am not some minor alpha you can dismiss with politics and pretty words. His attention returned to Sierra, and she saw something in his eyes that made her knees weak, not power or dominance, but wonder, like she was something precious he'd thought lost forever. Come, he murmured. Let me show you the world you were always meant to rule. Chapter 7. Departure and Revelations. Pack nothing but what means something to you. Sierra stared at the handful of belongings scattered across her tiny servants' quarters, a pressed flower from her parents' grave, a worn book of fairy tales, a silver locket that had been her mother's. This is everything, she said simply. Damon's expression darkened as he took in the sparse room, the thin mattress, the single cracked mirror. 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years they kept you like this. It could have been worse. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted the honesty when his power spiked dangerously. No, his voice was steel and velvet. It could not have been worse, and it will never be again. Royal servants bustled around them, packing clothes Sierra had never seen, silk gowns and fur-lined cloaks that looked like they cost more than the entire Moonhaven treasury. I can't wear these, she protested, fingering fabric soft as moonbeams. You're about to be queen of the most powerful realm in existence, Damon replied, amusement flickering in his golden eyes. Rough wool won't suffice. A soft cough interrupted them. They turned to find an elderly woman in a hooded cloak, her violet eyes ancient and knowing. Your Majesty, she said, bowing gracefully. My lady, Mariah, Damon's voice held deep respect. I wondered when you would reveal yourself, Sierra gasped. You're the oracle, the one who gave the original prophecy. Mariah's smile was sad and proud at once. I have watched you grow into your power, child. Watched you survive what would have broken lesser souls. The prophecy, Sierra began, but Mariah raised a weathered hand, was deliberately misinterpreted by those who feared its true meaning. Her violet gaze shifted between them. A warrior Luna whose love makes her mate invincible. A bond strong enough to face the darkness that stirs once every few centuries. Damon's arm tightened around Sierra. It's beginning again, isn't it? Mariah nodded gravely. The ancient enemy awakens. And only you two, united as true mates, have the power to stop what's coming. Sierra's blood chilled. What's coming? War, Mariah said simply. War like this realm has never seen. Chapter 8. Journey to Power. The royal caravan stretched for miles, armored guards, supply wagons, and a carriage that looked like it belonged in fairy tales. Sierra pressed her face to the silk-draped window, watching familiar forests give way to rolling hills dotted with villages she'd only heard described. Everything looked different from inside luxury instead of servitude. Regrets? Damon asked from beside her, his voice carefully neutral. About leaving? Sierra considered the question seriously. No. About the years I lost believing I was worthless? Absolutely. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. Where they touched, warmth spread up her arm like liquid sunlight. Tell me about the royal court, she said. What am I walking into? Intrigue? Politics? People who smile while planning your destruction. His smile was sharp. The usual. Wonderful, Sierra muttered. And here I thought scrubbing floors was complicated. Their conversation was interrupted by shouts from outside. The carriage lurched to a halt as armed figures emerged from the tree-lined bandits by their mismatched armor and hungry expressions. Stay here, Damon commanded, already reaching for his sword. Like hell, the words surprised them both. But something in Sierra's blood was singing, calling for battle in a way that felt natural as breathing. They moved together without planning, him flowing out the left side of the carriage while she took the right. The first bandit to reach her died before he could blink, her borrowed blade finding his heart with deadly precision she'd never known she possessed. Back to back, they fought with a coordination that defied explanation. Where Damon's strength created openings, Sierra's speed exploited them. Where her agility drew attacks away, his power crushed them. When the last bandit fell, they stood, surrounded by bodies, both breathing hard and staring at each other in amazement. Well, Damon said finally, his voice rough with something that might have been arousal. That was enlightening. Sierra wiped blood from her blade, feeling more alive than she had in years. I think, she said softly, I'm going to like being queen. Chapter 9. Royal Awakening. The Crystal Palace rose from the mountainside like something out of legend. Towers of white stone spiraled toward the clouds, their surfaces embedded with crystals that caught and reflected sunlight in brilliant rainbows. Gardens cascaded down the mountain's face in impossible terraces, filled with flowers that bloomed in colors Sierra had never seen. It's beautiful, she breathed. It's yours, Damon replied simply. The moment Sierra's feet touched the palace steps, chaos erupted. Ancient weapons mounted on the walls began to glow and hum. Protective wards that had been dormant for centuries flared to life, strengthening until the very air shimmered with barely contained magic. Tapestries depicting legendary battles stirred in windless halls, their threads seeming to move and shift to show new scenes. What's happening? Sierra gasped as a suit of ancient armor bowed to her. Recognition, Damon said, wonder and pride mixing in his voice. The palace knows its queen. Servants scurried after them, frantically trying to deactivate magical artifacts before they overloaded. A crystal chandelier chimed like silver bells whenever Sierra passed beneath it. Ancient doors opened at her approach without her touching them. The bathroom of echoing eternity, announced a harried-looking chambermaid, opening a door to reveal a bathing chamber carved from living crystal. Please, Your Majesty, touch nothing until we can. Sierra accidentally brushed against a crystal formation. Water began flowing from hidden springs, filling the bath with steaming, perfumed water, while soft music emanated from the walls themselves. Adjust the sensitivity settings. The maid finished weakly. Damon's laughter echoed through the crystal chamber. Perhaps we should start your magical training sooner rather than later. Sierra turned to find him watching her with an expression that made heat pool low in her belly. The steam from the enchanted bath had dampened his dark hair, and his golden eyes held promises that made her mouth go dry. Training, she managed. Yes, that sounds practical. His smile was pure predator as he stepped closer. Practical, he agreed, his voice dropping to a rumble that vibrated through her bones. Was never what I had in mind. Chapter 10. The Warrior's Heart Awakens. The training yard was built into the mountainside, its stone floor worn smooth by centuries of royal warriors. Sierra stood in the center, wearing leather armor that fit like it had been made for her, facing down Raphael Damon's beta and the kingdom's champion swordsman. Don't hold back because she's queen, Damon instructed from the sidelines, his golden eyes intent. She needs to know what she's capable of. Raphael nodded grimly, raising his blade. With respect, Your Majesty, I'll try not to hurt you too badly. Sierra smiled, and something predatory flickered in her emerald eyes. You're very kind, Raphael. I'll try to do the same. The beta lunged. Sierra moved like water, flowing around his attack and bringing her practice blade up in a perfect counter that would have taken his head if steel had been real. Raphael stumbled, shocked by her speed. Lucky, he began. Sierra was already moving, her blade a silver blur as she pressed her advantage. Raphael found himself being driven back, his superior strength meaningless against speed and instinct that bordered on supernatural. Within minutes, he was on his back with Sierra's blade at his throat. How? Raphael gasped. I don't know, Sierra admitted, stepping back and helping him to his feet. It felt natural. Show me. Damon's voice was rough with something between pride and desire. They faced each other across the training ground, and Sierra felt it again, that strange harmony, like their very souls were designed to complement each other. They moved together like dancers, deadly and graceful, each anticipating the other's movements before they were made. Where Damon's strength created chaos among the training dummies, Sierra's precision exploited every weakness. Where her speed left enemies off balance, his power finished them completely. When they finally stopped, both breathing hard, the training yard looked like a battlefield. That, Damon said softly, his eyes blazing with possessive satisfaction, is why they fear the prophecy. Sierra felt power humming under her skin, responding to his presence like a tuning fork finding its perfect note. This is just the beginning, isn't it? She whispered. His smile was sharp as winter. Oh, little wolf, he murmured, pulling her against him until she could feel his heart beating against hers. We're just getting started. Chapter 11. Intimate Discoveries. Their chambers were carved from living crystal, walls that caught and reflected light in endless prisms. Sierra stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun set over mountains that stretched to the horizon. In the distance, she could see other kingdoms, tiny lights that spoke of people living their lives in blissful ignorance of the power now stirring in the world. You're thinking too loudly, Damon said softly behind her. She didn't turn as his arms encircled her waist, pulling her back against the solid warmth of his chest. I'm trying to understand what's happening to me, to us. The bond, his voice was rough velvet against her ear, goes deeper than normal mate bonds. Can you feel it? She could. It was like a golden thread connecting her heart to his, thrumming with shared emotion and power that grew stronger every moment they touched. The visions started during training, she admitted. I saw other couples, throughout history, fighting together, their love making them unstoppable. His arms tightened around her. The warrior pairs. They appear when the realm faces its darkest hour. Sierra turned in his arms, studying his face in the crystal refracted light. You're afraid, she realized suddenly. Not of what's coming of me. Not of you, he corrected, his golden eyes intense. Of not being worthy of you. Of failing to protect something so precious. The vulnerability in his voice broke something open in her chest. This powerful, legendary male feared he wasn't enough for her when she'd spent years believing she was worthless. Damon, she whispered, rising on her toes to cup his face in her hands. You saved me. From a life of servitude. From believing I was cursed. You saved yourself, he interrupted fiercely. I just recognized what was already there. When their lips met, the room exploded. Crystals sang like a celestial choir, light fracturing into rainbow spirals that danced across every surface. The very air seemed to shimmer with magic as their bond deepened, becoming something that transcended physical touch. In Sierra's mind, visions flashed ancient queens and their warrior kings. Love so powerful it could reshape reality itself. This was what the prophecy meant. Not death, but life so intense it blazed like a star. If you're enjoying how her power unfolds, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I adore hearing from you. Chapter 12. Ancient Texts and Hidden Truths. The Royal Library was a cathedral of knowledge, its shelves stretching up into shadow-filled heights. Sierra ran her fingers along leather spines older than kingdoms, following Damon deeper into the archives where the most ancient texts were kept. Dust motes danced in shafts of light from crystal windows, and the air smelled of old parchment and secrets. Here, Damon pulled down a tome bound in scales that shifted color in the light. The Chronicle of Eternal Bonds. Sierra opened the book carefully, gasping as the pages came alive with moving illustrations. Warriors with golden auras fought beside queens whose power made the very earth tremble. Battle scenes shifted and changed, showing the same story repeated across centuries. Every 300 years, she read aloud, when the shadow tide rises, the ancient enemy awakens from its slumber beneath the world. Only the union of eternal fire, a warrior Luna whose love transcends death, can drive it back to the dark between realms. The prophecies weren't about you bringing death, Damon said grimly. They were about you preventing it on a cosmic scale. Sierra flipped pages, finding more references, more illustrations of bonded pairs standing against creatures of living shadow. There are so many of them. How did everyone get it so wrong? Fear, a dry voice answered from behind them. They turned to find an ancient librarian emerging from the stacks, his arms full of scrolls. Fear makes people stupid, Your Majesty. The oracle spoke of death and warrior queens, and fools heard only the first part. Show her the manipulation texts, Damon instructed. The librarian nodded gravely, spreading out scrolls covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. The enemy doesn't just feed on death and discord, it creates them. For millennia, it has been whispering to weak minds, turning mate against mate, kingdom against kingdom. Sierra's blood chilled as understanding dawned. Elias, his sudden fear of the prophecy, his willingness to reject the mate bond. Classic manipulation, the librarian confirmed. The entity prevents powerful bonds from forming by making potential mates fear their destiny. Damon's power flared dangerously. How many? How many bonds has it destroyed? Hundreds, maybe thousands. The old scholar's voice was heavy with sorrow. Each broken bond weakens the realm's defenses, makes the next awakening easier. Sierra closed the book with shaking hands. It's been planning this for centuries. Every broken heart, every rejected mate, they were all part of clearing the way. But it miscalculated. Damon's smile was sharp as a blade. It didn't account for someone strong enough to survive rejection and still embrace her true mate when he found her. The ancient texts seemed to pulse with approval, recognizing the bond that had formed despite every attempt to prevent it. War was coming, but for the first time in centuries, the realm had champions ready to fight back. Chapter 13. War Clouds Gathering. The Great Council chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from across the realm voiced their dissent. The prophecy speaks of destruction. Alpha Jackson slammed his fist on the ancient table. We cannot accept a queen whose very existence threatens. Threatens what? Damon's voice cut through the protests like a blade. Your comfortable ignorance? Your petty power games? Sierra sat beside him on the twin thrones that had appeared overnight, crystal formations that had grown from the palace floor itself, recognizing their bond. Around them, the most powerful wolves in existence argued about her fate like she wasn't there. The old texts are clear, Alpha Ashton insisted. Warrior Luna spring war. To those who threaten their mates, Sierra interrupted, her voice carrying new authority that made several alphas step back. Perhaps you should examine why that frightens you. Elias rose from his seat among the minor alphas, his face haggard with sleepless nights. I demand the right to challenge this farce. She was my mate first. You rejected her. Damon's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Publicly, brutally. That severed any claims you might have had. I was protecting the realm. Elias's composure cracked. The dreams, the whispers in the dark, they showed me what she would become. Silence fell like a physical weight. Dreams? Sierra asked softly. What dreams, Elias? Shadows with voices like honey, telling me how she would destroy everything I loved. How the prophecy meant death for anyone who bonded with her. His voice broke. They came every night for months before you listened to the enemy's lies. Mariah's voice carried from the chamber's entrance. The ancient oracle moved through the crowd like a force of nature, before you let fear turn you into its puppet. The assembled alphas fell silent as she reached the center of the chamber. The entity awakens, she announced. Already its influence spreads through the realm, turning pack against pack, mate against mate. It feeds on discord, grows stronger with every broken bond. Then why risk the prophecy? Alpha Calvin demanded. Why not keep her locked away? Power exploded from both thrones simultaneously. When the light faded, cracks spiderwebbed through the stone walls. and every alpha in the chamber was on their knees, overwhelmed by combined force that defied natural law. Because, Sierra said quietly, her emerald eyes blazing with inner fire, I am not your problem to manage. I am your queen to serve. She rose from her throne, and ancient magic rose with her. War is coming whether you acknowledge it or not. The question is, will you stand with us, or will you become another weapon in our enemy's hands? Chapter 14. First Blood. They came at midnight like shadows given form. Sierra woke to the sound of steel on steel echoing through the crystal corridors, Damon already moving beside her with fluid grace. Their bond sang with shared alertness as they armed themselves without words. How many? She asked, sliding a blade into her belt. 50, maybe more. His golden eyes gleamed in the darkness, coordinated assault on 3 fronts. They moved together through the palace, their connection allowing them to fight as one entity with 2 bodies. Where Sierra's speed created openings, Damon's strength exploited them devastatingly. The first assassin died before he knew they were there, Sierra's blade finding the gap between his ribs while Damon crushed his companion's throat. They flowed through the corridors like death itself, leaving bodies in their wake. In the throne room, they found the real battle. Raphael and the palace guard were desperately holding the center while attackers poured through shattered windows. The ancient thrones blazed with protective magic, but even crystal walls were cracking under the assault. Together, Damon growled. They charged into the chaos, and the tide of battle turned instantly. Fighting side by side, they became something beyond natural law. Sierra's blade work was poetry written in blood, each strike flowing into the next with deadly precision. Damon's power shattered armor and bones with equal ease, his presence on the battlefield like a force of nature. But it was when they moved as one that true devastation began. Their bond created a feedback loop of power that made the air itself burn. Enemies who came too close simply stopped, not dead, not wounded, but drained of life force itself, as if their love was so intense it consumed everything else around them. When the last assassin fell, the throne room looked like a hurricane had passed through it. Impressive, Damon said, breathing hard as he surveyed the carnage. Sierra wiped blood from her blade, feeling power still humming under her skin. That wasn't even difficult. They were testing us. Which means, Raphael said grimly, stepping over bodies, whatever's coming next will be much worse. Through the shattered windows, distant fires blazed across the kingdom. The war had begun. Chapter 15. The exmate's desperation. Elias knelt in his private chambers, hands pressed against his temples as voices whispered in the darkness. She could have been yours, the shadows crooned. Queen of queens, power beyond imagining, and you threw it away for a lesser prize. Stop, he whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. Through his window, he could see smoke rising from distant battles. Reports flooded in daily, the Alpha King and his queen cutting through armies like they were made of paper, their combined power reshaping the very landscape. Camila entered without knocking, her ice-blue eyes wild with fury. Your pack questions your leadership. Half the nobles have already fled to seek the king's mercy. They'll find none, Elias said hollowly. I saw what they did to the assassins, what they'll do to anyone who threatens their bond. So you'll just give up? Camila's voice cracked with desperation. Abandon everything we've built? What have we built? Elias laughed bitterly. A kingdom founded on rejecting the most powerful Luna in existence? A political alliance based on cowardice? The shadows in the corner grew deeper, more substantial. She was yours first, they whispered. The bond can be reclaimed if you're strong enough to take it. Elias's head snapped up. What? Ancient ritual, blood magic. Force the original bond to reassert itself. The darkness seemed to smile. Of course, it requires sacrificing the current mate first. No. Elias backed away from the corner. I won't become a kinslayer. Not kill, the shadows corrected. Corrupt. Turn his love for her into something poisonous. Make their bond a weakness instead of strength. Camila stepped closer, her eyes reflecting unnatural light. Think about it, Elias. With her power backing your claim, no kingdom could stand against us. She'll never forgive me, never trust me again. She won't have a choice, the darkness whispered. Love corrupted becomes obsession. Obsession becomes slavery. Elias stared out at the burning kingdom, at the evidence of power that should have been his by right. In the distance, Scouts reported impossible things, the Alpha King and Queen moving faster than wolves could run, their combined magic creating barriers that nothing could cross. They were becoming legends while he cowered in shadows. "What would I have to do?" he asked quietly. The darkness laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Simply everything you've ever feared." Chapter 16. The Realm Divides. War erupted across the realm like a plague of madness. From her position atop the Crystal Palace's highest tower, Sierra watched fires burn in a dozen different directions. Reports flooded in constantly, pack turning against pack, ancient alliances shattered overnight, neighbors who'd lived in peace for centuries now slaughtering each other in the streets. "It's spreading too fast," Raphael reported grimly. "Every diplomatic mission we send comes back reporting more conflicts. Some of our own allies are starting to question whether supporting the prophecy is worth this chaos." Damon's jaw tightened. "They don't understand what they're really fighting. Because they can't see it," Mariah said from behind them. The ancient oracle moved to stand beside Sierra, her violet eyes reflecting the distant flames. "The entity works through influence, not direct confrontation. It turns existing fears and prejudices into weapons." Sierra felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like lead. "This is because of me. Because I accepted the bond instead of rejecting it like it wanted." "No," Damon's voice was fierce. "This is because our enemy is finally showing its true nature. The conflicts were always there, waiting, we're just seeing them without the pretense of civilization." A messenger burst onto the tower, barely pausing to bow before delivering his report. "Your Majesties, urgent news from the southern borders. 3 alpha houses have declared open rebellion against the crown. They're marching on the capital with combined armies." "Who leads them?" Sierra asked. The messenger swallowed hard. "Elias Ashford, Your Majesty. He claims the Queen was stolen from him unlawfully and demands trial by combat to reclaim his property." The tower shook as power exploded from both royals simultaneously. Crystal formations cracked, and the messenger dropped to his knees as energy crackled through the air like visible lightning. "Property?" Sierra's voice was deadly quiet. "He's made his choice," Damon said, golden eyes blazing. "The entity promised him power in exchange for service, and he was weak enough to accept. Then we end this." Sierra turned from the window, her emerald eyes hard as jewels. "All of it. No more political maneuvering, no more attempts at diplomacy. You mean, we show them exactly why warrior pairs were feared throughout history." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "We give them the war they've been asking for." Thunder rolled across clear skies as if the very heavens approved. The time for restraint was over. Chapter 17. The Ancient Enemy Revealed. Reality twisted in the depths of the abandoned mine. What had once been solid stone now writhed like living flesh, walls pulsing with veins of shadow that hurt to look at directly. At the center of the corruption sat something that might have once been beautiful, a figure of pale perfection whose very presence made the air scream. "Such pretty toys," it mused, watching visions of burning kingdoms play across mirrors made of crystallized despair. Breaking their bonds, turning love into hatred. They make it so wonderfully easy. The entity had worn many names throughout the millennia: discord, separation, the void between hearts. It fed on the spaces where connection should exist, growing stronger with every severed bond, every relationship destroyed by fear. "Soon," it whispered to the shadows that served as its voice, "soon the last true pair will fall, and this realm will belong to beautiful emptiness." For 3 centuries, it had prepared for this awakening. Whispers in dreams, subtle influences that turned mates against each other, prophecies deliberately misinterpreted to inspire fear instead of hope. Every broken heart had fed its power. Every rejected bond had weakened the realm's defenses. But something had gone wrong. The girl, the Omega, who should have been easy to break, had survived rejection and found her true mate. Worse, their bond was stronger than any in recorded history, creating a feedback loop of power that made the entity's essence burn with each pulse of their shared heartbeat. No matter, it decided, studying tactical reports from corrupted minds across the realm. Love that strong becomes obsession easily enough. Turn the light too bright, and it blinds instead of illuminates. The entity reached out with tendrils of influence, touching the minds of those already partially corrupted. Elias Ashford trembled in his chambers, fighting voices that promised him everything he'd lost. Camilla paced like a caged animal, her beauty curdling into something harsh and desperate. But there were others, alphas, whose fear made them malleable, nobles whose ambition blinded them to the price of power. Yes, the entity purred as its web of influence spread further. Let them fight for what they think they want. And when exhaustion claims the bonded pair, when their legendary love proves insufficient against an entire realm turned against them, thunder crashed outside the mine as if the very earth rejected its presence. Then I will show them what true emptiness means. In the Crystal Palace, Sierra woke screaming from nightmares filled with whispers that felt far too real. The final confrontation was coming. Chapter 18. War erupts. The Valley of Broken Kings became a cauldron of death. 3 massive armies converged on the ancient battlefield where legendary conflicts had been decided for millennia. Steam rose from ground soaked with centuries of blood as morning mist met the heat of war preparations. Sierra stood atop a crystalline rise, her armor blazing gold in the dawn light. Around her, the royal forces, loyal guards, allied packs, and volunteers who'd come to fight for the prophecy prepared for battle against overwhelming odds. 30,000, Raphael reported grimly. Against our 12. Numbers, Damon said dismissively, checking his blade's edge. The entity deals in quantity. We represent quality. Below them, enemy banners snapped in the wind. Elias's forces held the center, his once proud standards now stained with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Flanking him were the armies of corrupt alphas whose fear had made them into puppets. He's broadcasting his challenge, a communications officer announced. Claims the queen was stolen unlawfully and demands single combat for her return. Sierra's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. Return? Like I'm a lost horse? The entity's influence grows stronger, Mariah warned. Her ancient eyes could see the tendrils of corruption spreading through enemy ranks. Look at their formation, they move with unnatural coordination. It was true. The opposing forces flowed together like parts of a single organism, their individual wills subsumed into something larger and infinitely more malevolent. Then we show them what real coordination looks like. Sierra drew her blade, power humming along its edge. No more holding back, no more trying to minimize casualties. You're certain? Damon asked quietly. Once we unleash our true potential, there's no hiding what we are. Sierra looked out at the armies arrayed against them, warriors corrupted by whispers of ancient evil, led by a man too weak to resist promises of power. Good, she said firmly. Let them see exactly what they're fighting. War horns sounded across the valley, their deep notes echoing off distant mountains. The Great War had begun, and with it, the true test of whether love could stand against the void between all things. Chapter 19. Blood and Steel. The battlefield became a portrait painted in violence. Sierra led the left flank, her blade carving through enemy lines like lightning through storm clouds. Behind her, royal guardsmen followed the path she cut, their formations holding steady despite impossible odds. To the right, Damon commanded with devastating efficiency. Where he moved, enemy ranks simply ceased. Not fleeing, not retreating, but unmade by power that refused to acknowledge their existence. But it was when their forces met in the center that true carnage began. Fighting side by side, they became something beyond mortal understanding. Their bond created a feedback loop of destruction that made the ground beneath their feet crack and smoke. Enemies who came within reach simply stopped, not killed by blade or claw, but drained of life force itself. Impossible! Elias gasped from his position near the rear. His corrupted allies pressed forward despite devastating losses, driven by compulsions that overrode survival instincts. Not impossible, Camila snarled beside him, her ice-blue eyes reflecting unnatural light. Just more than we anticipated. Around them, the battle raged with supernatural intensity. Werewolves fought in both human and shifted forms, creating a chaos of fangs, claws, and steel that left the ancient battlefield soaked crimson. Sierra ducked under a massive claw swipe, her counterstrike taking the corrupted alpha's head clean off. She spun immediately into a defensive position as 3 more enemies converged on her location. They died within seconds, her blade work so fluid it seemed like dancing. My queen, Raphael's voice carried across the battlefield. They're breaking through on the eastern approach. Sierra looked to find their right flank crumbling under sustained assault. Without hesitation, she sprinted across the battlefield, her power blazing like a golden comet. She arrived just as enemy forces threatened to overwhelm their defensive line. Her presence alone was enough to rally the defenders, but when she began fighting, the enemy advance simply stopped. Whatever coordination had driven them forward shattered against her fury. In minutes, she'd turned a potential rout into a devastating countercharge that sent corrupt forces fleeing in terror. But each use of power cost her. Sierra felt something vital draining away with every battle, every moment of supernatural ability that defied natural law. Across the field, she caught Damon's eye. In his golden gaze, she saw the same understanding. They could win this battle, but the price might be everything they'd fought to protect. Chapter 20. The Turning Point. Elias stood at the crossroads of his soul as chaos reigned around him. The corrupted voices in his head screamed for him to advance, to claim what had been promised. But watching Sierra fight, seeing the warrior queen she'd always been meant to become, broke something inside him that had been twisted for too long. "She was never meant to be mine," he whispered, the realization cutting through supernatural compulsion like a blade through silk. "What?" Camila spun toward him, her beauty curdled into something desperate and hungry. "You can't give up now. Not when we're so close." Around them, their forces pressed forward despite devastating casualties. The entity's influence drove them past reason, past survival instinct, turning them into weapons of living flesh. But Elias could see the cost written in every corrupted face, souls hollowed out by promises of power that would never be fulfilled. "Look at them," he said quietly. "Really look. They're not fighting for victory. They're fighting because they can't stop. So are we," Camila hissed. "The ritual binds us to this path." "No." Elias straightened, feeling clarity return for the first time in months. "It binds those who choose to remain bound." The voices in his mind rose to a shriek of fury as he reached for the silver pendant around his neck, a protection charm his grandmother had given him, worn but never truly believed in. "You cannot break free," the shadows snarled. "You have tasted power. You hunger for it. You will serve." "I tasted fear," Elias corrected, crushing the pendant. Light blazed from between his fingers, burning away the corruption that had festered in his soul for months. "And I choose to starve, rather than feed on it anymore." The change was instantaneous. Across the battlefield, warriors under his direct command faltered as supernatural compulsion shattered. Some fell to their knees, vomiting black fluid. Others simply stood in confusion, remembering themselves for the first time in weeks. "You've doomed us all!" Camila screamed, raising a blade crackling with dark energy. Elias caught her wrist before the strike could land. "No," he said softly. "I've finally done something right." The blade turned in her hand, finding her own heart. As she died, the corruption eating away at her beauty finally showed its true face, something rotted and hollow that had worn her form like a mask. Around them, the tide of battle began to turn as more corrupted warriors broke free from supernatural influence. For the first time since the war began, victory seemed possible. But in the depths of the earth, something ancient and terrible felt its puppets breaking free, and it was not pleased. Chapter 21. When Gods Make War. Reality screamed as the entity finally showed its true form. The abandoned mine exploded outward, spraying earth and stone across the valley as something vast and terrible emerged from the depths. It rose like a living shadow made manifest beautiful and horrifying at once, its presence warping space itself. Enough. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, driving warriors to their knees as psychic force crashed over the battlefield. Plants withered, water boiled, and the very air became difficult to breathe. 3 centuries of careful manipulation, undone by children playing at love. Sierra and Damon found each other across the chaos, their bond blazing like a beacon against the encroaching darkness. Power flowed between them in visible streams of gold and silver, creating a barrier that held back the entity's influence. "Together," Damon said simply, they moved as one toward the nightmare that had crawled from the earth's depths. Around them, reality bent and twisted as the entity's true power was finally unleashed. "You think your little bond can stand against the void between all things?" The creature laughed, a sound like breaking worlds. "I have ended love stories across 1,000 realms. I have made hope itself into a weapon of despair." Tentacles of living shadow lashed out, each strike capable of leveling mountains. Sierra and Damon flowed around them like water, their connection allowing them to move with perfect synchronization. But the entity was right, their power, no matter how unprecedented, was still finite. and this creature had fed on broken hearts for millennia. "Show them," it crooned, and suddenly Sierra was seeing visions. Every couple throughout history who'd faced this moment, every warrior pair who'd stood against the darkness, and every single one who'd failed, their love consumed and turned into fuel for the very force they'd tried to defeat. Your passion will become obsession. Your devotion will become destruction. Love always burns brightest just before it dies. Sierra felt doubt creeping in, not about Damon, never about Damon, but about whether any mortal emotion could stand against something so ancient and vast. Then Damon's hand found hers, and she remembered. They weren't fighting with love, they were fighting as love. "Now," she whispered. They opened their bond completely, removing every barrier, every protection, every limitation they'd placed on their connection. Power flowed between them without restraint, creating something that transcended individual existence. The entity's scream shook mountains as light blazed across the battlefield, not the light of fire or magic, but the illumination of two souls becoming one perfect weapon against the darkness. For one shining moment, they were everything love was meant to be, and the void between all things simply ended. Chapter 22. Victory's Price. Silence settled over the Valley of Broken Kings like a benediction. Where the entity had stood, only clean earth remained. The corruption that had twisted stone and shadow was gone, leaving behind a crater that already showed signs of new growth, grass pushing through scorched soil, flowers blooming in impossible colors. Sierra and Damon knelt at the crater's edge, holding each other as power slowly bled from their exhausted forms. Around them, surviving warriors picked through the aftermath with the careful movements of those who couldn't quite believe the nightmare was over. "Is it really gone?" Raphael asked hoarsely. His armor was cracked, his sword broken, but his eyes held wonder instead of despair. "Gone," Mariah confirmed. The ancient oracle moved among the wounded with surprising grace, her violet eyes bright with tears of relief. "The void has been filled. It will not return in our lifetimes, nor our children's." Elias approached slowly, his steps careful and deferential. The corruption was gone from his features, leaving behind a man who looked older but somehow cleaner. "Sierra," he began, then stopped, clearly struggling with words. She looked up from Damon's arms, her emerald eyes holding exhaustion but no anger. "You broke free, Elias. That matters. I should have been stronger. Should have trusted what we had instead of fearing what we might become." "You were human," she said simply. "Humans make mistakes. The important thing is, you chose to correct yours when it mattered most." He nodded, accepting the forgiveness he wasn't sure he deserved. "What happens now?" Sierra looked out over the valley where armies had clashed just hours before. Already, werewolves who'd been enemies were helping each other with wounds, the entity's influence lifting to reveal the connections that had always existed beneath the surface. "Now we rebuild," she said firmly. "All of us, together. The realm won't be the same," Damon added quietly. "Too much has changed. People have seen what they're capable of when they stop fighting each other." "Good." Sierra struggled to her feet, Damon rising beside her. "Maybe it's time for something better than what came before." As they walked toward the crystal palace that gleamed in the distance, healing began. Not just of wounds or broken kingdoms, but of the fundamental rifts that had made their realm vulnerable to ancient evil. The prophecy was fulfilled. The warrior pair had faced the darkness and won, but their real work was just beginning. Chapter 23. Coronation of Legends. The Crystal Palace had transformed itself for the occasion. Towers stretched even higher, their surfaces now embedded with gems that caught sunlight and threw it back in patterns too beautiful for mortal eyes. Gardens cascaded down the mountainside in impossible terraces, filled with flowers that bloomed in colors that had no names. Representatives from every pack, every kingdom, every corner of the realm filled the great hall. But this time, instead of coming to challenge Sierra's right to rule, they came to pledge allegiance to the queen who'd saved them all. "Seems excessive," Sierra murmured, adjusting the crown that had grown from the crystal palace itself, a circlet of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. "You literally saved reality," Damon replied, his own crown a masterwork of silver and gold that seemed to contain captured starlight. "I think a celebration is appropriate." They stood before the twin thrones that had merged overnight into a single seat of power crystal formations that grew from the palace floor like crystallized love itself. "Your Majesties," Mariah called in her clear voice, The representatives of the realm seek audience. One by one, they came forward. Alpha Jackson, his pride tempered by genuine respect. Alpha Ashton, no longer hiding behind fear of prophecies he'd misunderstood. Calvin, Raphael, dozens of others who'd learned to look beyond surface fears to the strength that lay beneath. "We pledge our loyalty," they said in unison, "to the queen who chose love over fear, and the king who saw worth where others saw only curse." But it was Elias's approach that drew the most attention. He moved slowly, carrying something wrapped in silk. "I have no right to ask," he said quietly, "but I brought something that belongs to you." He unwrapped the package to reveal a simple silver locket, Sierra's mother's necklace, the one she'd worn the night he rejected her. "I kept it," he admitted, "as a reminder of my mistake, but you should have it back." Sierra accepted the locket with shaking hands, feeling the last piece of her old life clicking into place. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "Your Majesty," he knelt formally. "I pledge my pack's loyalty to the crown, and my personal service to making amends for my failures." "Then serve well," she replied, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned her power through trial by fire. "Help us build something worth the price we paid to protect it." As the ceremony continued, Sierra felt the weight of legend settling around them like a comfortable cloak. Their story would be told for centuries, the Omega who became a queen, the king who saw through surface fears to find his perfect match. But for now, they had work to do. Chapter 24. Ever After and New Legends. 5 years later, the Crystal Palace hummed with life and laughter. Sierra walked through gardens where children from across the realm played together, young wolves whose parents had once been enemies, learning friendship instead of ancient feuds. The flowers responded to their joy, blooming brighter wherever small hands touched crystal petals. "Your Majesty!" a young voice called out. Sierra turned to find a girl of perhaps 8 years, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Is it true you were once a servant?" "I was." Sierra knelt to the child's level. "Why do you ask?" "My grandmother says even servants can become queens if they're brave enough." Sierra's smile was warm as summer sunlight. "Your grandmother is very wise. But it's not about becoming queen, it's about becoming who you were always meant to be." "And how do you do that?" "By choosing love over fear," Sierra said simply. "Even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary." The child nodded solemnly and scampered back to her games. Sierra continued her walk, finding Damon in the training yards where he was sparring with Raphael and a group of young warriors. "Still showing off for the recruits?" she teased. His grin was unrepentant. "Someone has to maintain our legendary reputation." They walked together toward their private chambers as the sun set over mountains that had known war but now knew peace. In the distance, they could see other kingdoms, lights twinkling in windows where families gathered for evening meals, secure in the knowledge that ancient evils no longer hunted in the spaces between heartbeats. "Any regrets?" Damon asked softly as they reached their crystal balcony. Sierra considered the question seriously. "About the pain? The years lost believing I was worthless? Sometimes. But about where we ended up?" She turned into his arms, feeling their bond pulse with warmth and strength that 5 years had only deepened. "Never." "Good," he murmured against her hair, "because I have plans for the next few decades." "Oh, really? Care to share?" "Building schools where children learn about connection instead of division, establishing trade routes that make kingdoms into partners instead of rivals. Maybe." His eyes held a particular warmth that made her heart skip. "Expanding our family." Sierra's breath caught. "Damon, only when you're ready," he assured her quickly. "No pressure, just possibilities." She thought of the children in the gardens, of the young warriors training with hope instead of hatred, of a realm finally learning to heal from centuries of manipulation and fear. "I think," she said carefully, "I might be ready for some new possibilities." His kiss was soft and reverent, full of promises for tomorrows they'd earned the right to plan. In the distance, Mariah watched from her tower and smiled. The prophecy was complete, but this story, their story, was just beginning. Love had conquered the void between all things, and sometimes that really was enough for happily ever after. The end. Thus ends the tale of Sierra and Damon, the Omega who became a legendary queen and the king who saw her worth when she could not see it herself. Their bond became the foundation for a new age, one built on connection rather than division, love rather than fear. And in the crystal palace that grew from their union, their story became legend, inspiring countless others to choose bravery over safety, hope over despair, and love over the comfortable darkness of solitude. Some say, on quiet nights, you can still hear their laughter echoing through crystal halls, a reminder that even in the darkest times, two hearts beating as one can reshape the world itself. And if this tale stole your breath even once, do like, share, and subscribe for more.